This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
And welcome in, folks, to another edition of Open Mic Night. I am your host, Notes Lukey, and on today's episode, back by popular demand, it is Nate Leopold. Wants to be an NFL scout one day. He was on last week, a great episode previewing the NFL draft. And go check that one out last week as well. It was great, and I'm sure it's going to be another great episode here, talking about the Lions draft and everyone that they've picked. And we're also going to talk a little bit about before, some of the news around the NFL with the draft. And Nate, of course, is a big Steelers guy. His reaction to Kenny Pickett going to Pittsburgh, not leaving the South Side at all, as some Pittsburghers were saying. So it's really, really my pleasure to welcome back, by popular demand, Mr. Nate Leopold. Nate, thanks again for joining us. Really happy you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me back on, Noah. I had a blast last week. People love the pod, so I'm great. It's great to be back and get to talk about what actually happened. We talked about what we thought might happen, and turns out what we thought might happen, nothing was right. So it'll be awesome to get into what really happened and the implications of it.
It seemed like it was a great atmosphere over there in Las Vegas as well. And, we talked about it last week how the NFL is trying to move around these different cities the last, 7-8 years to different locations. Detroit, of course, hosting the 2024 draft. So the atmosphere was great there. I had a cousin, shout out to my cousin Jake, who was from Denver, who ended up going out to the draft in Las Vegas. And he said it was an absolute blast out there as well for the first round. But how about this? I want to talk about the whole draft, as a whole, Nate. There was a lot of movement in the first round, a lot of teams trading picks. Only one quarterback, Kenny Pickett, your guy, selected in the first round. Mm-hmm. What was with all that movement? And guys like Malik Willis, who were projected maybe even go in the top 10, ended up falling to the third round. Desmond Ridder fell. A lot of these other guys, Nakobe Dean was another big one. Now, why was there so much movement? And then, these guys that were projected in the first round, a lot of them, started to slide.
It's like you said, there was the most trades in the first round in NFL history. And what I really think that spoke to was there was no consensus top players and quarterbacks. I don't know if people have seen on Twitter where the Panthers put out a video of last year, their boardroom talking about who they might take. Their coaches in front office knew exactly how the first 6 or 7 picks were going to go. And they had them 100% right, because when you have top elite quarterbacks, you sort of see the scheme fit and you know where they're going to go, and it makes the rest of the board just easier for it to fall. When you don't have those quarterbacks or those true superstar players where they are better than everybody else in the draft, it's a lot harder to pinpoint how the draft is going to fall, because once you change one domino, it causes the rest to change. It just like at the top. Talking about the Lions last week, all we could talk about was Aiden Hutchinson. If he's there at 2, run the card up. But we were like, there's no way that the Jaguars pass on who is clearly the best player in the draft. And they do. And then that causes a ripple effect throughout the rest of the first round. So that was one of the big key points. Another one is how the contracts of specifically wide receivers have changed the game in terms of the NFL draft. We had 6 receivers go from pick 8 to 18. That was an unheard of run. And some of those guys truly were worth those picks, but some of them got clearly bumped up because they're a receiver on a rookie contract. A.J. Brown got traded for the 18th pick. He gets a $25 million contract. I mean, a lot of these guys are getting these big money deals. Receiver is now the second highest paid position behind quarterback. So that really created a different board than what we've seen in the past, where maybe 2 or 3 receivers go. I mean, go back to the Henry Ruggs draft. Henry Ruggs went 12, CeeDee Lamb in the 17, Jerry Jeudy at 14, Jefferson at 21. All of those guys, Jefferson, Lamb, those guys specifically, projected as better than just about anybody in this class. But because of the value of those cheap receivers has now been heightened, it really caused the board to change big time. So that was a really interesting first round as a whole.
I think, Nate, you make an interesting point about the value of wide receivers in the NFL today. And, I think a lot of, what our perception was of positions that were valued, obviously the quarterback, but, when the Blind Side movie came out in the late 2000s, that whole perception was the second highest paid player on the team was the left tackle, protecting the quarterback's blind side. But now you're starting to see, the second, third highest paid guys on the team are these wide receivers now. So I think it just really speaks to, the value that teams are putting on these wide receivers now increased more than ever.
And you look at who's been successful. Kansas City's been the best team in the AFC. They have Tyreek Hill, who's the best or second best wide receiver in football. Packers have the most regular season wins over the last 3 years. They had Devontae Adams, top 1 or 2 receiver. Now, ironically, both of those guys got traded. Jamar Chase, Bengals take him number 5. He seemingly elevates that offense all the way to the Super Bowl. So these teams are now looking around and looking at the value of these receivers and what they're actually, maybe they're in today's passing league, they're having the biggest impact on winning. Okay, we're going to go invest in those receivers. But it's interesting that, again, you go back to Kansas City and in Green Bay. Those are the 2 biggest case studies from this whole situation. They have 2 elite quarterbacks, maybe the 2 best quarterbacks in football. And instead of continuing to pay their very expensive wide receivers into their 30s, because they're both in their late 20s right now, so their primes are sort of winding down, they said, we're going to move off of you. And they both went and got second-round receivers. They both had multiple first-round picks, but opted to wait to the second round to get their receiver. So that was a really interesting strategy that the 2 teams that had multiple first-round picks, everyone pegged them in their mock drafts to have both of them taking a receiver. Neither of them went receiver. They let everybody else overdraft receivers. And in the second round, they both got studs in the second round in Sky Moore and Christian Watson.
Yeah, you talk about the Packers. First time, they have not taken a receiver in the first round since 2002. And that's even with losing Devontae Adams and everything, they did not decide to grab one, and they instead waited to that second round to grab him too, which I thought was very interesting as well. But Nate, how about the? I want to ask you about the biggest surprise you thought of. Not only just the first round, but just really the entire draft. What really stood out to you? Last week about that.
The biggest surprise continues to be the New Orleans Saints in the draft. They just every year it seems like they make a move that if you understand trade value, you're sitting there going, "What are they doing?" We've seen it in the past, and back in the day, you could argue they have Sean Payton, Drew Brees. They're on the cusp of a Super Bowl. If they want to go all in for 3 or 4 players, so be it. You're that close to Super Bowl. You feel like those 3 can make a difference. We saw them take, I think, 4 players in one draft with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Zach Bond, trading up for Marcus Davenport in the year before. But again, they were competing for Super Bowls. They were a 500 team last year. And not only do they trade a lot of compensation in next year's draft to move up into this year's draft, to get a second first-round pick. They then trade up again to get to 11 to get Chris Olave, many of which, Chris Olave is not the 11th best player in the draft. Again, you way overdrafted the value of Chris Olave, and you gave up future value to get up and get him. I thought that move was just staggering. Someone put out a tweet the other day about how much capital they've really given up for Trevor Penning, Chris Olave, Bradley Roby, and think one other player, and it was staggering what they gave up for what they got. And again, they're not in a situation where they're on the cusp of a Super Bowl. They're a 500 team. Sean Payton's gone. Drew Brees is gone. Your competitive advantage is gone. So what's the plan? That's what the Saints are doing just has totally bucked the consensus of what you do as a front office.
Well, you know who has a lot of ex-New Orleans Saints coaches is the Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell, of course, tight ends coach over there. He also played for the Saints. Aaron Glenn, former defensive assistant over there, now the defensive coordinator for the Lions as well. So a couple of comparisons, I guess, you can make, especially with some of the trades that Brad Holmes made. And we'll get to the big one with Jameson Williams at number 12, I should say, in a little bit. But I do have one more thing to talk about with you, Nate, before we talk about the Lions draft picks. Your reaction to Kenny Pickett getting selected by your hometown Steelers was, I think, if somebody would have, because I was watching the draft with you, Nate, if somebody took a video of that, I think it would have gone viral because of how crazy you went. Like, I have never seen a guy at the draft, because I've watched it with a lot of people before. I've never seen a guy act so crazy after a pick, and you were just so high on Kenny Pickett being able to come home with the Steelers. You even ripped off your shirt, had a special Kenny shirt on. What was that reaction like, and why were you so excited that Kenny Pickett is with the Steelers?
So part of it was how much I wanted Kenny to go to the Steelers. Another part of it was I really feared that the Steelers were going to pick Malik Willis. You were with me. I had my shirt over my head, ready for Malik Willis's pick. We were all sitting there. We were other Steeler fans, and we were waiting for them to take Malik Willis. And then Franco Harris starts waving the card and goes, "I think everyone's gonna like this one. This is a good one." You had that feeling that it was gonna be Kenny Pickett, and then when they announced it was Kenny Pickett, just over the moon joy, because when you're talking about finding a franchise quarterback, you do need to find a guy that fits your city. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah.
Your quarterback is the leader of your team, the face of your franchise. He needs to embody your city and their values. You look at Josh Allen. He's big. He has the big arm. He's from a small town in Wyoming. He's from Wyoming.
Fireball, California. But he went to a small school,
went to a small school in Wyoming.
Yeah.
He really embraces – he feels like Buffalo. Ben Roethlisberger from Ohio. He's blue-collar. He's tough. His playing style is tough and raggedy. He embodied the Pittsburgh Steelers. You could look throughout all of history where guys that embody their city. Drew Brees became the ambassador of New Orleans. You need to find a guy that embodies who your city is. Kenny Pickett is that guy. He's blue-collar. He's tough. Against Boston College during the COVID year, he had a severe ankle injury that ended up knocking him out for a month. He came back in and ends up running in the game-tying touchdown. And he really should not even been playing. He missed the whole next month. That's the type of toughness that Kenny Pickett brings. Now, also as the player, as we talked about last week with the draft with my big board, Kenny Pickett was by far my quarterback one and my 7th overall player, which is definitely higher than most other analysts. But Kenny Pickett, in terms of, he doesn't have that elite ceiling. But if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, you're never going to be bad enough to go get a quarterback that high in the draft. So in terms of his fit for your city and then his talent level, he's accurate. He's a good decision maker. He has a good enough arm to make throws. He's mobile. He's actually a very underrated athlete, which he proved against Wake Forest that long run. So he kind of has all the traits you're looking for in a quarterback that can win you games. He's just not going to be a special elite talent. And for the Pittsburgh Steelers, I think that's a perfect fit. Now, it's not a perfect fit for every team, every organization, but it doesn't matter when you're talking about a franchise quarterback. It's for your team, your situation, your organization. Kenny Pickett was the perfect fit for the Steelers, and I think he's going to make a lot of people really happy.
I wonder if Mike Tomlin is going to start Mitchell Trubisky week 1, or because the trend, at least the last couple of years, it seems like it's more so, unless you're some very, very elite special talent, you're waiting a little bit of time before you start your rookie quarterback. Jared Goff experienced that in his first season in Los Angeles with the Rams. Do you think you see that where Trubisky gets the start first couple weeks and then you get Kenny in there, or do you think he's just going to start week 1?
See, normally with rookie quarterbacks, I like that philosophy, but Kenny was a 4-year starter at Pitt, and he's going to be 24 years old. This guy's an adult. He's a grown man. He's been there. He has tons of experience. He was seen as a guy who could play right away. That was part of the value of Kenny Pickett. So I think that, if he shows he can get a grasp on the playbook, which I shouldn't be a problem, he played with a lot of pro concepts. Mark Whipple, funny enough, was Ben Roethlisberger's first quarterback coach with the Steelers, so he has tons of experience with pro concepts. He made pro reads. I think he'll adjust rather quickly and be the starter week 1, which is kind of unfortunate for Mitch Trubisky, who I think was going to be a good story for the Steelers. I think he was going to be a good starting quarterback, but I think Kenny's the right move.
Yeah, I would agree too. He was. I did pick him in my NFL predict the pick as going to Pittsburgh. I actually had 9 of those correct at NFL.com, and so I just kind of did it an hour before. I just said let it rip, and sure enough, Kenny was one of the guys for sure. But you talk about another guy that I think can really embody the city, particularly with Detroit. I think Aiden Hutchinson. He's a guy that obviously just take away the fact that he's from Detroit, Divine Child High School. he is a guy that just, I think, has that blue-collar toughness to him, embracing the city, a franchise player. I think maybe he might have that more elite upside than maybe Kenny Pickett would, but at least he's a guy that could be the backbone of that defense for Dan Campbell down the road. So we're going to start with it, Nate. Aiden Hutchinson going number 2. He slid. When we first recorded the podcast on Monday last week, we thought it was for sure that the Jags were going to take Aiden Hutchinson, and you brought up the idea that they should take Afonwu maybe at number 2 at tackle, but about a half day before the draft actually began, we started hearing more reports about Trayvon Walker going to the Jags instead, which was very interesting and peculiar, I thought. And then finally, it happened. Aiden was able to go number 2. And I'll tell you what, a special homecoming for Detroit. And I don't think many Detroit fans are really upset at that pick at all.
No, I don't think you can be. And from no matter what perspective you look at it from. We talked about it that if he's there, they run the card up, and they did. You and I talked off air last week, building up about when the Vegas odds started to shift from Aiden Hutchinson number 1 to Trayvon Walker number 1. That like this might really happen. And it couldn't have worked out better for the Lions. Like you said, they not only get a great player who could be a consistent Pro Bowler, they also find a guy who embodies the city of Detroit, the toughness, the blue-collarness. He's a great leader. I mean, he turned around Michigan. He was a big part of beating Ohio State for only the second time in the last 17 years. That's truly special leadership. And Detroit's in need of that guy. Again, we talked about what is that culture post-Matthew Stafford. Having a guy like Aiden Hutchinson establishes that culture. And we'll get to the rest of the guys, but really this class is full of those high character, high leadership players that you really need to change the culture of an organization, because winning will help change the culture, but at the same time, you can't win or go where you need to go without the culture. And that needed, and again, post Matthew Stafford, they needed an identity. They needed a culture change. First, Dan Campbell brought that change, and now Aiden Hutchinson's going to be the next part of that.
It's crazy to think. You talk about changing the culture, Nate, with Aiden. At I was able to follow Aiden's career a lot in high school, because obviously I went to U of D Jesuit, Catholic League High School, as many of you guys know out there. We would play Divine Child in a lot of, those non-divisional games. So, they were all in the Catholic League, but, Divine Child wasn't in the Central like U of D is with all the other all-boys schools. But we were able to play Aiden. So I've watched him and followed him throughout his high school career, and I got to say, he really helped change the culture of Divine Child football when he was there. And he had some help because he had some guys that transferred in that ended up going Division I as well. But I think really it started with Aiden. You look at the history of DC football, the only 10-plus win seasons basically are when he was, I think a junior and a senior. So he changed the culture in high school. He definitely changed the culture at Michigan when it was basically a dead program with Harbaugh. Harbaugh was on the hot seat. When is he ever going to beat Ohio State? When is he going to win a Big Ten championship? Aiden, and with the COVID year of 2020, it seemed like all hope was lost for Michigan. All those guys transferred out, but Aiden stayed. He stuck around, and he made sure they got the job done. Changed that around. And even the younger guys that they interviewed on Michigan were saying that it really started with Aiden, that culture change around for that 2021 season. Can he do it again in Detroit? Can it be third time in a row at each level that he helps and change the culture? We shall see. But I think it's a golden pick for the Lions at number 2 and a homecoming, like I said, as well. All right, so we talked about last week how the Lions were sitting at 32 and 34. Nate, you predicted correctly that they were going to trade up. They were not going to sit still. I know there's a lot of Detroit fans out there that said that we should have stayed at 32, 34. I disagree. I think there was more value to be made. And you got to think, too, we haven't had a aggressive GM like this with the Lions in a long time. Brad Holmes was able to move up 20 spots, trade up with a divisional opponent in Minnesota to go and grab Jamison Williams, who is arguably the best receiver in the draft when healthy, from Alabama. Now, Nate, I know it's concerning with the ACL. We're not doctors, though. We don't see the medical reports, but it is an interesting pick. I do think because not only just because of the injuries and all that, and that he's small, but also a guy that, when healthy, can be such a dynamic weapon for this Lions offense, and could be adding more weapons to Jared Goff or whoever the heck the quarterback's going to be maybe in the future for the Lions.
Yeah, I think that trading up is not exactly what I would have done, but when you look at the value they got for trading up, home run, absolute home run from Brad Holmes. We were sitting there looking at the compensation, and we could not believe what Minnesota did. First of all, like you said, trading with a division rival. The unwritten rule, well, not really unwritten because this is how it is. When you trade in the division, especially in the draft, if you're trying to go up, you pay a premium to trade with a division opponent. It's so rare that division trades even happen. I know the Steelers and the Ravens made a trade a few years ago for Chris Wormley. It was their only trade in the last 15 years at all. So that speaks to the rarity of inter-division trades. Fun fact, Minnesota actually traded down twice with division opponents, which is wild. But the Lions, they really got a tremendous value from moving to 12. Our buddy that we watched the draft with, he said that based on the trade value chart, it was equivalent of Detroit moving from 32 to 25. And they went all the way up to 12. So that's how much value they got for moving up to 12. So while, Jamison Williams, we talked about receivers kind of being overdrafted, even though you trade all the way up to 12 to get them, which in theory, the value of number 12, that isn't great. But if that was equivalent to what you give up to get the 25th pick, you can think of it as in terms of they took Jamison Williams with the 25th pick. And if that's the case, absolute home run from Brad Holmes. You get a guy that he changes. We talk about guys that change the box count with the run game. Jordan Davis changes how much you can bring into the run game. Jamison Williams takes one out of the run game. He forces you to play too high to his side because if you play him one-on-one, he's running by your guy. There's very few, if any, that can run with Jamison Williams. He has that true different speed. There's levels of fast in the NFL. He is the fastest of fastest receivers. He's with Tyreek Hill, Henry Ruggs, Deshaun Jackson, those type of guys. In terms of one play a game, they're going to change the game. And as a defense, all you're trying to do is prevent that. So he has that special game-breaking speed. He has that speed from step one to the end. Some guys are built up speed. He is fast with every step he takes. So a true electric game changer there. And like we said, tremendous value to go up and get him at 12. I don't even care that they moved up into that receiver at 12 isn't great value. Tremendous pick, tremendous trade-off, an absolute steal from Brad Holmes.
Now, some Detroit fans out there were thinking, Jordan Davis ended up going 13 to the Eagles. Could the Lions have maybe taken Davis if they traded that high up? Especially because, obviously we know that Davis is healthy. He doesn't, to our knowledge, he doesn't have any, torn ACLs or anything like Jamison Williams. But, would you have traded up that high? Say you took Jordan Davis, to take two defensive players that high. Was that, if that would have happened, say, would you have been shocked by that, or would that interesting?
It would depend on the scheme. So where Jordan Davis went to the Eagles, in terms of the scheme fit, that too high system, like we talked about, Jordan Davis takes one guy out of the box that you can now play top down because you're not going to move Jordan Davis. So in a system like that, Jordan Davis has tremendous value. When talking about the Lions scheme with Aaron Glenn, it's a little different. There's a lot more one high, a lot more aggression with pressures. That's not going to be – you're not going to get the value out of Jordan Davis that you would if you played like the Eagles have with Jonathan Gannon. So it was more of a that's Jordan Davis, we talked about what's the value of a run stopping. It comes down to your scheme in part. And I think for the scheme of the Lions, Jordan Davis, while he's going to be an awesome player no matter what scheme he plays in, the value of their scheme related to Jordan Davis, that wouldn't have been great value. A guy like Jamison Williams, who, like we said, makes you play two guys over top of him, that changes the game more than Jordan Davis would for their scheme.
You Detroit fans out there that are listening that were not a fan of that Jamison Williams pick and you thought Jordan Davis might have been it, you listen to Nate right there. He knows what he's talking about, guys. The scheme and all that, that's what it comes down to. I know you guys love making emotional decisions, but the scheme and fit is what it comes down to. And I think Jamison Williams, I think he fit better in terms of that as well. I agree with you, Nate, than Jordan Davis would as well. And plus, one more thing about Jamison Williams. we know he has the torn ACL. We don't know when he's going to be back. We don't know if he's going to be halfway through the year, 3/4 of the way, if he just misses the entire season. Guys, remember, this is a process. This is a long rebuild. I get it. We've been waiting 60 years for a winner. I understand. But you have to give this regime time. It's not going to matter. The Lions aren't going for a playoff spot this year. If Jameson Williams has to sit, that's okay. Let him recover. Let him relax. Let him learn the system. Because we're going to need him next year, but this year he can take it easy a little bit. We don't have to rush him back. We're not going for a playoff spot. We don't need him right away. So I think in terms of us rebuilding, this is okay from Jameson Williams, especially with the injury concerns as well. You talked about
that patience.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's required with a full teardown rebuild.
Right.
If people are saying the Jets need to win, the Jets have been the worst team in football for the last 4 or 5 years. They needed a true hard reset. And if you look at the drafts they've had the last 3 years, they haven't they haven't panicked in free agency. 2, they've made value picks that they get the guys that will help them win long term. And now you look at their roster, they're starting to build a team that could make the playoffs next year because they did it the right way. If you're a Lions fan, you just have to have patience. Normally a rebuild job is truly 3 years. In your 3rd year, you should be starting to compete for a playoff spot, year 4 division. That's ideally when you do a full teardown rebuild, which the Lions needed. They trade Matthew Stafford. That was a true teardown. We need to rebuild the franchise top down. That was the right move, and they're going about it the right way, getting value players at valuable positions. And they're doing it the right way. They're not, like we said, they're also not panicking in free agency. DJ Chark and Deshaun Elliott are the 2 big free agency signings. They were on humongous bargain deals. So now that they're not wasting cap space. Whenever it comes time to actually start adding players next year, you're going to see them being aggressive and getting the guys they want because they've been patient for the first 2 years of the rebuild.
We're going to go on to the second round now. The Lions selected Josh Pascal, a defensive lineman from Kentucky. Nate, you were a guy that really liked this pick. I thought personally they were going to go into Kobe Dean or at least a linebacker there, but obviously we found out later that teams were very skeptical of Dean because of this nagging shoulder problem that he had, elected not to get surgery. But regardless, the Lions picked Josh Pascal, a guy that you liked, Nate. He can play on the outside, but also has that inside capability as well. And we all know how much help the Lions need on the D-line. Obviously they get it with Hutchinson, but they need a little bit more depth as well.
Yeah, Pascal's a little bit of a weird one because he's a kind of a tweener. He is a very explosive athlete, which alone will give him a pass rushing opportunity, whether he's playing inside or out. But he is on the smaller side. He's only 6'2.5", 32-inch arms, so shorter arms. That's not ideal for the inside. He's not overly big, so he's not going to be a consistent inside presence. But in terms of his ability, he gets after the quarterback. He has that relentless, but we talked about the traits needed at edge rusher, or a pass rusher, sorry. He has that relentless motor. He has the get off. He just has to continue to develop his moves. And he has the experience inside and outside. You get to third down packages. You start getting guys standing up. Like Aaron Glenn, again, we talk about scheme fits. Aaron Glenn had a ton of pressures on third downs back when he was with the Saints. That their defense, that was a big part of their identity. Dennis Allen, Aaron Glenn, they love third down. We're going to walk everybody up. It's sort of the old Dick LeBeau zone pressure, man pressure style defense. Josh Pascal fits that mode. He can rush inside and out, and that provides you with now you're going to put Aiden Hutchinson on one side and let him just go rush. And now you look at the other guys they have on their roster with their bigger interior defensive linemen, like Onwuzurike. You add in Josh Pascal. They're starting to build a lineup where they can run a bunch of stunts with the other guys, and that's where Pascal's going to thrive. Again, he can play inside, he can play outside. But again, most importantly, we talk about changing that culture in Detroit. This guy's a culture changer. Captain at Kentucky. His football character is off the charts. Guys like that tend to have successful careers, even if they don't have the high upside that you want in some guys. Josh Pascal is going to be a good NFL player, and he's going to be good in your locker room. He's going to make everybody else around him better. You can't put a price tag on the value guys like that have, especially in a rebuilding situation.
And the Lions, the last couple of years, have not really hit on those second and third round picks. So definitely Pascal, he basically has some pressure on him right off the gate because he needs to succeed in that Lions locker room. He needs to succeed on and off the field for this team, just because these guys that have been drafted in the second and third round, mostly in the last couple of years, have really not panned out. So hopefully Pascal can pan out, and he can definitely add some greatness to that the Lions defensive line this season. So in the third round, Lions, a little bit of surprise here. They took Kirby Joseph, a safety from Illinois. Nate, this was a guy that only started 1 year at Illinois, who's not really a perennial power in the Big Ten, but a guy who's long with some rangy arms that can go after the ball as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about they really don't need a safety.
Yeah. But
the way Kirby Joseph fits what they already have, I think it's a really good pick, especially here at the value at 97. That's a pretty good value pick. Kirby Joseph, like you said, doesn't have a ton of experience, but what he did show that you can't put a price tag on it. He had 5 interceptions in that 1 year. So ball skills like that in a league now where you talk about what wins you football games, because again the talent level is so close. The Lions had so many close games where they just came up a little bit short. What makes a difference in those close games? One, the turnover differential. And that's the type of guy that he can help with your turnover differential. He's going to create turnovers. He's going to create big plays. And that's ultimately how you win games. Now, Kirby Joseph, like you said, with 1 year of experience, a little raw. His instincts are a little lacking, which is always worrisome at safety because that's again a position that relies so much on those natural instincts. But he's developing, and he's not pressured to play year one. We talked about Tracy Walker and Deshaun Elliott being a really good safety combo. He's not pressured into playing year one every down. He can come in, play sub-package. They can move Deshaun Elliott around like the Raiders did. The Ravens, where he previously played. So that allows him to come in and get that experience on third down, but not really being thrown into the fire. And it's interesting. I was looking at mockdraftable.com, which does a great job of comparing the size and testing numbers of players from the combine. The number one comparison, size and speed-wise, to Kirby Joseph was Deshaun Elliott. Again, so the guy that he's going to be playing behind. So now you get two guys that have pretty similar skill sets and body types that you can now move around to pair with Tracy Walker. Like we talked about, the third down packages. How do you win in the NFL? Other than creating turnover margin, big plays, and getting off the field on third down. Your best team is if you can get a stop on first and second down, get it to third down. The Lions are really developing an excellent third down unit to get off the field. Again, long term, Deshaun Elliott's only on a 1 year contract. So if he doesn't pan out this year, Kirby Joseph learns from two vets, steps in maybe next year as a starter. I think that's a really good value pick there at 97. And again, with 1 year experience, tons of upside.
Interesting. I really hope, Nate, that he at least has the potential to become a starter because, like we said, those second, third round picks haven't panned out as much. But at least if they can get a value guy and who has the potential to start in the next couple of years, I think that'd be very, very good from the Lions' perspective over there at safety. Fifth round, they took James Mitchell, a tight end from Virginia Tech. I know a lot of Lions fans are just sick of hearing about Lions taking tight ends. A lot of fans, I think, are starting to turn on TJ Hawkinson a little bit just because he's not that elite guy that they thought he was. But adding a guy in James Mitchell seems like just more depth. Brock Wright was the backup tight end for the Lions last year. He caught a touchdown, but just saw limited reps as obviously TJ was getting more. But James Mitchell, I guess, could be a guy that you sub out for TJ if in certain packages as well with the two tight ends. I know the NFL loves the two tight end sets now, so I think maybe he could be a guy that has that potential as well. But we shall see about that. And the sixth round pick, this guy, of all the late round picks that the Lions had, this guy, Malcolm Rodriguez, linebacker from Oklahoma State, he intrigues me the most. I know he's very, very small. I get it. But he's very good in pass coverage, and that's his specialty. And what do the Lions need? What has been the concern at linebackers the last couple of years? Guys can't cover in pass coverage. Alex Anzalone lost in pass coverage. Jared Davis, he needed a map out there, it seemed like, every time he was on the field for the Lions. Now he's back. We'll see if he's improved, but at least his first couple of years he seemed lost out there. Jelani Tavai, oh my gosh, he was another guy that couldn't cover. So just repetitive mistakes by the Lions not having linebackers that can cover, but this is a guy that comes in, cover right away.
Yeah, Malcolm Rodriguez in the 6th round, tremendous value. We talked about them needing a linebacker. Probably could have gone with one earlier, but they get a guy in Malcolm Rodriguez who, again, another culture changer, was a part of Oklahoma State's tremendous defense. When you think about Oklahoma State, you think of the receivers, Des Bryant, Justin Blackman, James Washington. You think about their offense over the years, but really their defense is what made them Fiesta Bowl champions last year, and that was led by Malcolm Rodriguez in the middle. Like you said, he's going to be one of the smallest linebackers in football, 5'11", 232. That's one of the with 30-inch arms. That's the 1 percentile. So he has some of the smallest arms of the linebacker in the last 20 years. But his speed, his overall athleticism is fantastic, and he's a very short tackler. He has a wrestling background. He's violent. He's physical. He just lacks that great size. But you talk about 6th-round pick. Most of those guys don't make the roster. He's going to make the roster. He's going to provide value on special teams at the very worst. And like we talked about, 3rd down packages. Malcolm Rodriguez can cover. So that is a role on 3rd down. So he's going to find a role on this team. I really think it's a great value pick here. Again, you get a guy helps your culture, helps special teams, helps the defense. That's a home run pick in the 6th round. You don't tend to get value of those guys because everyone wants to take those big swings for upside. And yes, that's good in some situations. But for the Lions to get that kind of value in the 6th round at a position of need, I think it's an awesome pick.
Similar to the Derek Barnes pick from last year from Toledo, a high energy captain guy, great for the locker room. And I think Derek Barnes he at worst has special teams value, and you already saw him as a good special teams contributor last year. And he struggled, in tackling as well, and struggled a little bit in coverage. But I think Malcolm Rodriguez could be maybe a little bit of an upgrade from Derek Barnes in terms of coverage skills, and maybe even a little bit better of a special teams player as well. And then the final 2 picks for the Lions, James Houston, an edge from Jackson State, HBCU school. Of course, Deion Sanders, the head coach over there. And Chase Lucas in the 7th round, cornerback from Arizona State, learning from a former NFL head coach, Herm Edwards, and his defensive coordinator, Antonio Pierce, from the New York Giants, the old defensive end. So a couple NFL guys that have mentored these last 2 picks for the Lions. Nate, just adding more depth, it seems like, to the edge and the defensive backfield as well.
Yeah, with James Houston, they're just taking a stab on a guy that has some juice to him. You can't take enough chances on guys like that can show they have the burst off the edge. And again, like we talked about, most 6th and 7th round picks don't end up making a roster. If he doesn't make a roster, it is what it is. But if you hit on a guy that has some juice like that, that's a big win. And then Chase Lucas, he's 25 years old, so he's kind of the opposite of the James Houston, where you know what you're going to get in him. But he has a ton of football experience. Again, a captain at Arizona State, another high culture guy. And he has some good film. He's limited speed and size-wise. So you're talking about maybe a 4th or 5th cornerback inside on the nickel coming in your sub-package situations. But a 237 overall, 7th round. Again, most often they don't make the roster. A guy that could make the roster as a 4th, 5th corner, that would be a win if you're the Lions. And we talked about they have their top 3 corners. Chase Lucas maybe slides in as their 4th or 5th. I think that's a good pick too.
A couple of these undrafted free agents as well. I just want to go by the number 1 for the Lions, Khalil Pimpleton. He went to Muskegon High School, one of the best teams in the state of Michigan on the west side near Grand Rapids. He was a receiver at Central Michigan. Obina Eze from left tackle from TCU. Demetrius Taylor, defensive tackle, Appalachian State. Greg Bell, running back from San Diego State. Corey Sutton, wide receiver from Appalachian State. Nolan Given, tight end from Southeast Louisiana. Josh Johnson, wide receiver from Tulsa. Derek Deese Jr., tight end from San Jose State. Cedric Boswell, cornerback from Miami of Ohio. Jermaine Waller, corner from Virginia Tech. Zane Obeid, offensive lineman from Ferris State. He's a local kid. He went to Fordson High School on the east side of Dearborn. And Kevin Jarvis, offensive lineman from Michigan State as well. Lions, last year, they hit on one of their undrafted free agents, Jerry Jacobs, who, according to Pro Football Focus, was one of the best rookie corners in the league last year, but ended up getting hurt towards the end of the year. So any of these guys, Nate, that you think maybe the Lions could hit on with some upside?
The one guy there who has shown on film that he can be that guy, and again, it's a position of need for the Lions, Josh Johnson from Tulsa. Some people compared his movement skills to Antonio Brown. I know that's a large comparison, but if you watch his film, he moves in sort of a similar way to Antonio Brown. And he has some really good ball skills. He's good after the catch. Again, he's just not overly fast. That's going to be the big knock with Josh Johnson. He's a good football player. If there was one guy on this list who I think could hit, would be him. And again, receiver, although it's starting to shrink down the list of needs. Talk about adding Jameson Williams, DJ Chark. But as a fourth or fifth receiver, I think he could be a guy that hits for the Lions. He's a really good player.
So overall, Nate, you've really studied this Lions draft the last week or so. What would you think overall how well the Lions did in addressing some of those needs and getting guys that can change the culture and really fit the scheme as well?
Yeah, you could tell they had a clear plan. We're going to draft really athletic football players who are also highly intelligent, high football character guys. And you can't go wrong with that type of draft philosophy. When you're talking about rebuilding a franchise, that's the way to do it. You not only get really athletic players because you need to have good athletes. The Lions were a pretty unathletic team as a whole last year that showcased against the faster teams in the NFL. And they need to get faster, and they definitely got faster, but they also need to develop that culture like we've talked about, and you got guys that do that. You add Aiden Hutchinson, you add Jameson Williams. Those are two high-impact players that are going to be cornerstones of your team moving forward for this next generation of Lions football. And the rest, I think you're going to get some really good role players. Maybe you don't have the upside that some fans might want, but they hit a lot of doubles. And I think you obviously got the home run with Aiden Hutchinson and Jameson Williams. So I think the Lions had a really, really solid draft. The next stage of the rebuild, they hit a big check there. It'll be interesting to see how they go moving forward, because really next offseason is going to be the one that will make or break this tenure. This one is sort of laying the foundation the last 2 years with Penei Sewell, Aiden Hutchinson, young guys up front, help change the culture, also reestablish your identity on the line of scrimmage. Now, moving forward next offseason, how do you take that next step with the guys you already have?
I got to say, Nate, I think Hard Knocks this year is going to be very entertaining. We're going to see some battles, I think, with Penei Sewell and Aiden Hutchinson on there. They're going to be going after it. Best on best tackle in the draft last year, best edge rusher this year in the draft. And both guys are the same age as well, so it's going to be very exciting to see that as well. Before we close out the podcast here, I want to give two special shout-outs to two players that I played with at the University of Detroit Jesuit High School, Scotty Nelson and A.J. Thomas. Scotty, of course, you may remember him. We had him on the podcast a couple of years ago after he had a big interception against Michigan during the 2020 season on national TV. And he was a 3-year starter at safety for Wisconsin. He signed as an undrafted free agent with the Seattle Seahawks. And so big round of applause. Congratulations to my former teammate, Scotty. 4.38 40, incredibly fast. And, of the guys that I played with growing up, he was definitely probably the best, in terms of talent-wise. A guy that just played every position for us in high school and was able to just basically score a touchdown offensively. Pretty much every play it seemed like he had touchdown capabilities, and then just a lockdown safety as well. And A.J. Thomas, cornerback from Western Michigan, started 3 years there as well. He earned a minicamp tryout with the Chicago Bears. So two guys, two Cubs at U of D, who were actually in the regional at the regional combine in Allen Park with the Lions, as featured on the latest edition of Inside the Den, which is on the Lions YouTube page. You could see Scotty and AJ actually working out at the regional combine for them as well in that YouTube video. So really, I always had to shout out my U of D Cubs and really wish them the best. Maybe Scotty can help re-resurrect that Legion of Boom over there in Seattle. If he can stick on over there in the Pacific Northwest with Pete Carroll and company as well. Thanks again, folks, for tuning in to this podcast this week, and make sure to follow the network on Twitter, and also check out John Macaroon's fantastic coverage that he does with SI Lions and all the other great podcasts on the network. The Fan Report, Michigan Podcast, and Doc and Jock with the Wrestling Podcast, always fun to listen to as well. Nate, thanks again for joining us here. It was a lot of fun, and really happy you could come on and repeat as well.
Hey, thanks for having me back on. It was a blast again, as always. Talk NFL football. I've really enjoyed the last 2 weeks getting to talk about sort of a strategy going in, seeing how it unfolds throughout the draft, and then analyzing it post draft as we move towards the future and what becomes a critical season and next offseason for the Detroit Lions franchise.
See, Nate's a Steeler fan, and he's still very, very engaged with Detroit Lions football, and he's really high on us as well, coming from a program that's a team that's won 6 championships, 6 Super Bowls, and the Lions still need to get there, but I think they've definitely laid a solid foundation this year as well. Thank you again, folks, for tuning in, and make sure to tune in next week only on Open Mic Night.